Rome, 118 BC. The great Senate chamber fell silent as Marcus Aurelius Varro, a common legionary with mud still fresh on his boots, stood before Senator Quintus Fabius. The soldier's weathered hands trembled not from fear but from the weight of his request. "I seek your daughter's hand in marriage," he declared. Laughter echoed through the marble hall. The senator's eyes narrowed with contempt as he studied this man who dared rise above his station. "Cross the Alps and return alive," he proclaimed. "Then perhaps I'll consider your suit." The challenge was meant as a death sentence, not an opportunity. For no man of Varro's rank had survived such a journey alone. But in the soldier's eyes burned something the senator had not expected. Determination that would outlast winter itself. Would love truly be enough to overcome mountains, barbarians, and the rigid walls of Roman society? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The barracks echoed with the rhythmic sharpening of blades as Varro sat on his narrow cot, a worn military medal resting in his palm. 10 years of service to Rome, carved into a simple disc of bronze. His callous thumb traced the profile of the goddess Victoria, now smooth from years of similar motions. "You actually did it," Titus said, shaking his head as he entered their shared quarters. "You stood before the entire Senate and asked for Livia Fabia's hand. I thought you were just talking in your sleep again." Varro closed his fingers around the medal. "I had to. The consul's delegation arrives next month. And now you're going to die in the Alps because you couldn't love a baker's daughter instead." Titus dropped onto his own cot, his armor clanking against the wooden frame. "At least that would have been possible." "It wasn't a choice," Varro said quietly. He remembered the first time he saw her, during the festival of Flora 2 springs ago. He had been assigned to crowd control, sweating in formation as nobles paraded past. Then Livia appeared in her white stola, adorned with spring blossoms. Their eyes met briefly, his from beneath a standard-issue helmet, hers beneath a crown of flowers. Something impossible had passed between them in that moment. "She's worth crossing the Alps for," Varro said. Titus snorted. "No woman is worth freezing to death for, especially one who'll be married to someone else before you reach the foothills." "She won't marry him." "How can you be so sure?" Varro didn't answer immediately. The secret meetings, arranged through her slave Demetria, were too precious to share freely. The quiet moments in the gardens behind the Temple of Vesta, her passion for poetry, her dreams of a life not dictated by political alliance. "I just know," he finally said. A young soldier appeared at their doorway, looking nervous. "Marcus Aurelius Varro? This came for you." He handed over a small pottery shard with wax pressed over it. When the messenger departed, Varro carefully broke the seal. Titus leaned forward, curiosity overcoming discretion. "It's from her," Varro whispered, recognizing the handwriting immediately. "My father returns home enraged. He speaks of making an example of a presumptuous soldier. Be careful, my love. What you attempt is impossible, and yet, if any man could achieve it, that man is you. I will wait no matter what they force me to say in public. I have instructed Demetria to help you prepare. Meet her tomorrow at dawn by the eastern aqueduct. L**. Titus read over his shoulder and whistled low. "So it's true then. The daughter of Rome's most influential senator has been meeting a common soldier in secret." He shook his head in disbelief. "How long?" 6 months, Varro admitted, tucking the message into his tunic. "Started with a chance meeting at the market. Then notes. Then meetings." "You're either the bravest or the most foolish man in the Legion," Titus said. "Probably both." Varro began gathering his few possessions. A spare tunic, his service dagger, a small purse of denarii saved over years of campaigns. "You're actually going to do this," Titus realized, watching his friend's methodical preparations. "Cross the Alps in winter. What choice do I have?" Varro tied his meager belongings into a bundle. "Die trying to live the life I want, or live knowing I was too afraid to try?" Titus was quiet for a long moment, then reached under his cot and pulled out a leather satchel. My brother trades with the northern territories. Take this. It's not much, but it might help you survive the first mountain pass. He tossed the satchel to Varro. Inside was a thick woolen cloak, far better than military issue, and a small map sketched on vellum. The map's incomplete, Titus warned. No Roman has properly charted the central passes. But it's better than walking blind. Varro gripped his friend's shoulder. Thank you. Don't thank me, Titus replied grimly. I'm still watching a dead man pack. Livia Fabia sat motionless before her polished bronze mirror as Demetria arranged her hair with practiced hands. The ivory comb, a gift from her maternal grandmother, slid smoothly through her dark locks. In the reflection, she could see the door to her chambers securely closed, allowing a rare moment of private conversation. He's truly going, then? Livia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Domina. Demetria's fingers worked deftly, weaving Livia's hair into an intricate style befitting a senator's daughter. I am to meet him tomorrow with whatever assistance I can provide. Livia's hand closed around her maidservant's wrist. You must help him, Demetria. Father has already dispatched men to ensure he never reaches the mountains. I will do what I can, Domina. But a sharp knock interrupted them. Demetria immediately resumed her formal posture as the door swung open, revealing Senator Quintus Fabius. His imposing figure filled the doorway, the golden border of his toga marking his senatorial rank gleaming in the afternoon light. Leave us, he commanded Demetria, who bowed and exited silently. Livia remained seated, her back straight, her expression carefully composed. Father, I assume you've heard about the spectacle at the Senate today. He paced the room, his sandals slapping against the mosaic floor. A common legionary, a man who sleeps on straw and eats with his fingers, presuming to ask for your hand. I heard something of it, Livia replied evenly. Did you also hear that I've arranged your marriage to Consul Gaius Petronius? The contracts will be finalized before the calends of March. Livia's heart constricted, though her face betrayed nothing. Petronius was 3 times her age, with a reputation for cruelty toward his previous wives. I was not aware the negotiations had progressed so far. This marriage will secure our families' position for generations, her father continued. Petronius has no male heirs. Your sons will inherit his name, his wealth, his connections. And what of my wishes, father? The senator stopped pacing and turned to her, genuine confusion crossing his features. Your wishes? You are a daughter of Rome, Livia. Your duty is to your family and to Rome itself. His expression softened slightly. You've always been an intelligent girl. Surely you understand what's at stake. Livia turned back to her mirror, picking up the ivory comb. I understand perfectly, father. After he departed, she remained still, staring at her reflection until Demetria quietly returned. Your mother wishes to see you in the garden, the servant murmured. Valeria Fabia waited beneath the peristyle, inspecting the early spring blooms. Though her health had declined in recent years, she maintained the dignified bearing of Rome's aristocracy. She gestured for Livia to join her on a stone bench. Your father tells me you received his news with proper dignity, she said once they were alone. What other response would be permitted? Livia replied. Her mother's fingers brushed a strand of hair from Livia's face. I was wed to your father when I was younger than you are now. It was not a love match, but we found respect, partnership, and eventually, affection. Petronius buried 2 wives before their 25th year. Valeria sighed. I know. This is not the match I would have chosen for you. She hesitated. This soldier who asked for you today, do you know him? Livia's pulse quickened. I've seen him at the public festivals. Only seen. Her mother's knowing gaze made Livia look away. Daughter, I've noticed your absences, the coded messages, the way Demetria guards your secrets. Are you going to tell father? No. Valeria took Livia's hands in hers. But you must understand, this soldier, whatever his virtues, cannot change the order of Rome. Your father's challenge is not a true opportunity. It's a death sentence dressed as a chance. Livia's eyes glittered with unshed tears. Perhaps Rome's order needs to change. Take care, daughter, her mother warned softly. Such thoughts can be as dangerous as alpine passes. That night, Livia slipped from her bed and unlocked the small chest hidden beneath her sleeping couch. Inside lay texts her father would never permit, histories of Rome's enemies, maps of territories beyond the Republic's borders, accounts of mountain passages compiled from merchant tales. Knowledge that might mean the difference between life and death for a man attempting the impossible. Dawn painted the eastern aqueduct in golden hues as Varro approached the rendezvous point. Demetria already waited in the shadows, a bundle clutched to her chest. The senator's men watch the city gates, she warned as he approached. They have your description. Varro nodded grimly. I expected as much. Demetria handed him the bundle. From my mistress. Maps copied from the senator's library, information about northern tribes, and provisions she could gather without suspicion. Inside, Varro found a carefully rolled parchment. A map of the Alps with passages marked in delicate handwriting. Unlike the crude military maps that showed the mountains as mere barriers to be overcome, this one contained details of valleys, rivers, and tribal territories. Though still woefully incomplete, it offered more guidance than he had dared hope for. This could save my life, he murmured. There's more, Demetria continued. The Lady Livia requests you meet her tonight in the gardens behind the Temple of Vesta. 1 hour past sunset. Varro's heart quickened. It's too dangerous. Her father will have her watched. She insists. She says it may be your last chance to speak before. The servant woman's voice trailed off. Tell her I'll be there. Throughout the day, Varro methodically prepared. He sold his ceremonial dagger, the only item of value he possessed, to a merchant for 10 denarii. He traded his distinctive military cloak for a nondescript brown one at the market. He visited the barracks physician, claiming stomach pains to secure medicinal herbs for his journey. As afternoon waned, he sought out Cato Cornelius, a grizzled veteran who had served under Scipio during the campaigns against Carthage. The old soldier sat outside a modest taberna, warming himself in the late winter sun. His scarred face creased into a frown as Varro explained his mission. The Alps in winter? Cato spat on the ground. You're either in love or insane. Possibly both. I've heard you crossed the mountains during your service, Varro pressed. Following Hannibal's route, yes, but in summer, boy. And with an army at my back. Cato studied Varro's face. You're serious about this? I am. The veteran sighed deeply. Very well. Listen carefully. The greatest dangers aren't what you expect. Not the cold or the height, though they'll kill you quickly enough. It's disorientation. The mountains play tricks on your mind. The sun rises from what seems the wrong direction. Valleys that should lead north suddenly turn west. Men walk in circles until they collapse. He reached into his tunic and withdrew a small bronze compass, crude but functional. Take this. Keep it dry. When in doubt, trust it over your eyes. Twilight fell as Varro made his final preparations. Titus appeared at his quarters, grim-faced. I've arranged a week's leave, he announced. I'm coming with you, at least as far as the foothills. Your career. My career can rot in Hades, Titus interrupted. You need someone to watch your back until you're beyond the senator's reach. Varro clasped his friend's arm gratefully. Thank you, brother. Later, cloaked in shadows, Varro slipped into the sacred gardens behind the Temple of Vesta. Livia waited beside a marble fountain, her dark hair uncovered, falling freely down her back in a manner that would scandalize Roman society. You came, she breathed as he emerged from the darkness. I would cross more than mountains for a moment with you. She pressed her palm against his cheek. My father has spies watching every road north. We'll find a way past them. Varro, she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. No one has ever survived what you're attempting, not alone. Then I'll be the first. He reached for her hand, entwining his fingers with hers. I crossed the Mediterranean to fight Rome's enemies. I marched through deserts in Africa. I can cross the Alps. And if you succeed, if you return, then your father will honor his word, or face the shame of breaking it before all of Rome. They both knew the naivety of this statement. Men of Senator Fabius's stature rewrote their own honor as needed. But speaking the fear aloud would make it too real, too overwhelming. Instead, she pressed something into his palm. A small token carved from ivory, a piece broken from her treasured comb. "Return this to me," she whispered against his lips. "I'll be waiting." They departed Rome before dawn, slipping through the Porta Salaria disguised as common travelers. Varro's military sword, his gladius, hung concealed beneath his cloak, its familiar weight a reminder of the life he was leaving behind and the empire he had served. "The main roads will be watched," Titus warned as they cleared the city walls. "We should stay to the lesser paths." The morning mist clung to the rolling hills of Latium as they struck northward, avoiding the well-traveled Via Flaminia. By midday, the winter sun had burned away the fog, revealing the countryside in its dormant splendor. Fields lay fallow, waiting for spring planting. Occasionally, they passed small farmsteads where thin trails of smoke rose from modest dwellings. "I've never seen Rome from this side," Varro remarked as they paused atop a hill, looking back at the distant city. From here, the great capital appeared almost humble, its marble monuments reduced to white specks against the landscape. "Few soldiers do," Titus replied. "We usually march out in formation, eyes forward, minds on the coming battle." They encountered their first obstacle at a provincial checkpoint near sunset. A pair of officials inspected travel documents of merchants and travelers heading north. "Papers," demanded the senior official, a corpulent man with the insignia of the provincial governor on his tunic. "We carry messages for the garrison at Arretium," Titus improvised, producing military identification tablets. The official examined their documents with narrowed eyes. "These authorize military travel, not civilian passage." "Urgent dispatches," Varro explained smoothly. "We're traveling light for speed." The man's suspicion was evident, but the authority of military documentation was difficult to challenge. "Very well, but there have been reports of deserters. Be prepared for additional inspections." As they continued north, Varro noticed a group of merchants preparing to make camp nearby. Their wagons bore markings of Gallic trade goods. "We should join them," he suggested. "Merchants have information about the roads ahead." The head merchant, a weathered man named Quintus, welcomed them to share his fire. "You boys military?" he asked, offering them cups of watered wine. "Recently discharged," Titus answered carefully. "Heading north, then?" "Not many travel that direction this time of year." "Family in Mediolanum," Varro lied. "My mother's health fails." The merchant seemed satisfied with this explanation. As the evening progressed, Varro skillfully steered the conversation toward road conditions and the situation in the north. "The passes are treacherous until late spring," Quintus advised. "Some years they never truly clear. The tribes beyond aren't particularly welcoming to Romans these days either." "Oh," Varro feigned casual interest. "Senate keeps pushing boundaries, demanding tributes. The Helvetii and Sequani grow restless. I'd avoid their territories if I were you." Later, as they settled into their bedrolls, Titus whispered, "Someone's watching our camp." Varro had noticed it too, shadows moving with too much purpose at the perimeter of the firelight. "The senator's men? Likely. We should separate in the morning. I'll create a distraction while you continue north." "No. We stay together until we're beyond their reach." Dawn brought confirmation of their fears. As they packed their meager possessions, a group of 4 men approached the merchant camp. Though dressed as travelers, their military bearing was unmistakable. "The senator isn't wasting time," Titus muttered. One of the men addressed the merchant leader. "We seek 2 travelers, soldiers, heading north. A reward for information." From their hiding place behind a wagon, Varro caught Quintus's eye. The merchant gave an almost imperceptible nod before responding to the men. "Saw a pair matching that description yesterday." took the east fork toward Clusium at midday. When the men departed, Quintus approached Varro and Titus. "I don't know what trouble you're in, boys, and I don't want to know. But those men aren't official peacekeepers. We're grateful for your discretion," Varro said. The merchant reached into his wagon and withdrew a sealed letter bearing an official stamp. "Take this. Trade authorization for Gallic territories. Might help you pass more checkpoints without scrutiny." As they continued their journey, now following trails even smaller than before, Titus glanced at his friend. "The senator must want you dead badly to send bounty hunters so quickly." Varro's hand instinctively touched the hilt of his gladius. "Or he fears I might actually succeed." 10 days into their journey, they reached the northernmost Roman outpost, a weathered fort perched on a hillside overlooking lands Rome claimed but scarcely controlled. Beyond lay territories where Roman authority faded with each passing mile. "This is where we part ways," Titus said as they made camp in a sheltered grove just out of sight of the fort. Varro nodded solemnly. "Any longer and they'll mark you as a deserter." "Take the western route," Titus advised, pointing to Livia's map spread between them. "The eastern passes are more heavily patrolled, both by our forces and local tribes." The night passed in somber preparation. At dawn, they clasped arms in the manner of brothers in arms. "If I don't return," Varro began. "You'll return," Titus interrupted firmly. "Just remember what Cato said about the mountains. Trust the compass, not your eyes." They parted without further sentiment, soldiers accustomed to goodbyes that might be final. Varro watched his friend descend toward the fort before turning northward, alone for the first time since leaving Rome. By midday, he encountered his first non-Roman settlement, a Gallic village nestled in a valley of tall pines. Children paused in their play to stare at the stranger approaching their homes. An older man stepped forward, hand resting cautiously on a knife at his belt. "What brings a Roman to our doors?" he asked in accented but understandable Latin. Varro produced the merchant's sealed letter. "I travel north on authorized business." The man examined the document with surprising literacy. "Trade inspector? You carry no goods." "Advance scout," Varro improvised. "Assessing routes for the spring caravans." Suspicion lingered in the man's eyes, but the official seal carried weight even here at the edges of Roman influence. "You may rest here tonight, Roman, but keep your sword sheathed." The village elder, Divico, offered Varro a place by his fire. As they shared a meal of roasted venison, the old Gaul studied his guest. "You're no trade inspector," he stated plainly. Varro tensed, but Divico waved a dismissive hand. "Your business is your own. But a word of caution, whatever story you tell, make it consistent. People communicate more than Romans believe." "I seek passage through the mountains," Varro admitted, choosing honesty where deception seemed futile. Divico's bushy eyebrows rose. "In winter, the gods must hunger for your soul." "Perhaps, but I must try." The next morning, as Varro prepared to depart, commotion erupted at the village perimeter. A hunting party returned, supporting a wounded young man. Blood soaked his tunic from a vicious gash across his thigh. Without thinking, Varro rushed forward. "Let me help. I've treated such wounds in the field." Initial resistance gave way as he demonstrated battlefield medicine, cleaning the wound with wine and skillfully binding it with herbs he'd brought from Rome. "You have a healer's hands for a soldier," observed the wounded man's father. "Every legionary learns to stitch his brothers when needed," Varro replied. The act earned him unexpected goodwill. As he prepared to leave, Divico approached with an older man Varro hadn't seen before. "This is Ambiorix. He trades with the northern tribes beyond the mountains. He says he will guide you to the Alpine foothills." Ambiorix, a stern-faced man with intricate tattoos across his forearms, nodded curtly. "The Roman helped my nephew. I will help the Roman, but only to the mountains. After that, you face the gods alone." Their journey over the next 3 days revealed a world vastly different from Rome's ordered landscapes. Forests grew wild and ancient, untouched by systematic logging. Villages appeared and vanished with organic irregularity rather than strategic planning. People lived not as subjects of a distant senate but as members of interconnected tribes governed by complex traditions. On the fourth day, they crested a hill and Varro saw them for the first time, the Alps, rising like a wall of stone and ice across the northern horizon. Even at this distance, their magnitude humbled him. White peaks pierced the sky, separated from the mortal world by bands of dark forest that cloaked their lower slopes. "There lies your path, Roman," Ambiorix said, a note of finality in his voice, "and likely your grave." In a smoky tavern at the edge of Gallic territory, Varro sat quietly observing the mix of traders, travelers, and local tribesmen. He'd spent the last of his Roman denarii on a meal and lodging, but now held something potentially more valuable. A bronze coin marked with unfamiliar symbols, payment from a farmer whose infected wound he'd treated the day before. "Gallic currency," a voice commented in Latin. A man slid onto the bench across from him, his face half hidden beneath a hood. "Accepted in territories where Roman money only buys suspicion." Varro's hand moved casually toward his concealed dagger. "You seem to know much about currencies. And you seem far from your legion, soldier." The man pushed back his hood slightly, revealing a familiar face. "Marcus Tullius, merchant of wine and information. We met on the road from Rome." Varro recognized one of the merchants from Quintus's caravan. "You've traveled north quickly. Some journeys are more direct than others." Marcus glanced around before continuing in a lower voice. "3 men follow you. Mercenaries, hired in Rome. They've been asking about a lone Roman soldier traveling north." "How do you know this?" "Information is my true trade. They offered silver for word of your passage." Marcus smiled thinly. "I accepted, of course." Varro's muscles tensed. "And now you've come to collect a higher price from me? If I wanted you captured, I wouldn't be sitting here." Marcus placed a small leather pouch on the table. Inside is information more valuable than silver. The names of the men hunting you, their methods, and the routes they watch. "Why help me?" The merchant's expression hardened. 10 years ago, Senator Fabius prosecuted my brother for speaking against a land bill that favored patrician interests. He died in prison awaiting trial. He pushed the pouch toward Varro. "The enemy of my enemy deserves at least a warning." After Marcus departed, Varro carefully examined the contents of the pouch. Beyond the promised information was a map marking the locations of Roman sympathizers and spies in the border regions. The senator's reach extended farther than he'd imagined. The next morning, Varro departed before dawn, avoiding the main roads as Marcus had advised. By midday, he'd reached a river crossing where, according to the map, one of the mercenaries had been bribing the ferryman to report travelers. Rather than approach the crossing, Varro moved 2 miles downstream where the river narrowed. There, he found a fallen tree creating a precarious bridge. He was halfway across when shouts erupted from the bank. 2 men emerged from the trees, their Roman-style swords marking them as the mercenaries Marcus had warned about. Trapped on the log, Varro had no choice but to continue forward as one man circled to the opposite bank. "Senator Fabius sends his regards," called the larger of the two. "He says you're welcome to return to Rome, in a burial shroud." Varro reached the far side just as the second mercenary arrived to block his path. Drawing his gladius, he faced the man in the stance of a Roman legionary. "The senator must be paying well if he sent professionals," Varro observed, circling cautiously. "Well enough to make sure you never reach the mountains," the man replied, lunging forward. The clash of steel echoed through the forest as Varro parried the attack. His opponent fought with the disciplined technique of formal military training, likely a former legionary turned sword for hire. As they fought, the second mercenary crossed the log bridge, attempting to trap Varro between them. Recognizing the futility of fighting both men, Varro feinted, then broke away, sprinting into the dense forest. The pursuit lasted until nightfall. Only when darkness made tracking impossible did Varro finally rest, huddled beneath the roots of a massive oak. As he caught his breath, the reality of his situation sank in. These men wouldn't stop. The senator's wealth ensured a constant supply of hunters. 2 days later, Varro encountered a Gallic hunting party led by a man named Brennus. After a tense initial meeting, Varro's ability to speak basic Gallic phrases, learned during his military campaigns, eased suspicions enough to secure a conversation. "I seek passage to the mountains," Varro explained, offering his Gallic coin as a gesture of respect. Brennus examined the coin, then studied Varro with shrewd eyes. "Romans rarely travel alone in our lands. Are you a deserter?" "No. I journey for personal reasons." "Personal reasons don't make a man brave the Alps in winter." Brennus handed back the coin. "But they might make him foolish enough to try." Varro awoke to the unfamiliar scent of herbs burning in a clay bowl. His side throbbed with dull pain where the mercenary's blade had caught him. During their last encounter, the wound wasn't deep, but fever had set in 2 days after their escape into the foothills. "The infection recedes," observed an elderly woman who tended the herbal mixture. She spoke in the Gallic tongue, which Varro now understood better after weeks with Brennus's people. He was in a roundhouse at the edge of a Gallic settlement nestled against the first significant rises of the Alps. Through the open doorway, he could see children playing, their game involving a small wooden carving tossed between them. "How long have I been here?" Varro asked, his voice rough from disuse. 3 nights, Brennus answered, ducking through the low doorway. "The Roman steel that cut you was poisoned. Coward's tactic." Varro wasn't surprised. The senator's men grow desperate. "They've moved on," Brennus informed him. "Convinced you died in the forest from your wounds. We made sure they found enough blood on the rocks to believe it." As Varro's strength returned over the following days, he observed the rhythms of Gallic life. Children learned to hunt and track as soon as they could walk. Women wielded authority in domestic affairs and religious matters. Men shared stories of battles against Roman expansion with a mixture of pride and bitter memory. One evening, a small boy approached Varro as he sat by the communal fire. Without a word, the child placed a wooden carving in his hand. A wolf, meticulously detailed despite the simple tools used to create it. "For protection," the boy said simply before running back to his mother. Brennus, sitting nearby, smiled slightly. "My nephew. His father died fighting your legions 3 summers ago." "I'm sorry," Varro said, turning the carving in his hands. "Are you? You wore the same armor, carried the same standard." "I fought where Rome sent me," Varro admitted, "but I never took pleasure in it." "Yet you served an empire that claims our lands, taxes our harvests, and calls us barbarians." There was no hostility in Brennus's voice, merely curiosity. "Why does such a loyal soldier now flee Roman hunters?" Varro explained his situation, the senator Livia the impossible challenge. As he spoke, he realized how the story must sound to people who had suffered under Roman expansion. When he finished, Brennus was silent for a long moment. "You risk death for love. That, at least, we understand." He stood, gesturing for Varro to follow. "Come. If you're to survive the mountains, there's much you must learn." The next days brought intensive training. Brennus taught him to construct snowshoes from flexible branches and rawhide. An elderly hunter showed him how to find north when clouds obscured the stars. Women demonstrated which alpine plants could be eaten and which treated frostbite. "The mountains take the unprepared," Brennus explained as they practiced building emergency shelters. "They care nothing for why you climb, only whether you've earned the right to pass." One morning, a scout returned to the settlement with troubling news. Roman patrols had been sighted in the valley below, unusual so far north and so late in the season. "They searched the villages," Brennus translated, "offering rewards for a Roman fugitive." "The senator doesn't believe I'm dead," Varro realized. "No, and now he threatens our people to find you." Brennus's expression darkened. "We should have let the poison take you." That night, Varro approached Brennus as the Gaul prepared weapons for a hunting expedition. "I'll leave tomorrow," Varro stated. "I won't bring Rome's shadow upon your people." Brennus tested an arrowhead with his thumb. "And go where?" "The winter deepens. The high passes will be closed already. I'll find another way north, perhaps around the mountains rather than through them. There is no around that doesn't add months to your journey. Brennus set down his work with a sigh. The spirits of my ancestors would curse me for saying this, but I will guide you through the lower passes. Why? Varro asked, genuinely surprised by the offer. Because I, too, have seen what happens when Rome decides a man's fate. Brennus met his gaze steadily. My people have fought your empire because we choose our own paths. Perhaps it's time a Roman learned to do the same. The mountains grew from foothills to giants as Varro and Brennus ascended. Their breath frosted in the thinning air, and the fur-lined boots the Gauls had crafted for Varro, so different from Roman military sandals, saved his feet from the creeping cold. The Romans who crossed with Hannibal, Varro asked during a brief rest, how did they survive? They didn't, Brennus replied bluntly. Not all of them. The mountains claim thousands. Even elephants fell to the ice. For days into their climb, they encountered a small group descending, traders from a northern tribe, their faces wind-burned and grim. The high passes closed. Their leader warned in the trading pigeon of the border regions. 3 of ours didn't make it. Storm came without warning. That night, sheltered in a rocky overhang, Brennus explained the true danger of their undertaking. The mountains speak to each other. A clear sky becomes a killing storm in the time it takes to knock an arrow. The wind drives men mad with its endless voice. The cold numbs until you feel warm again. That's when death approaches. You paint a comforting picture, Varro commented dryly. I paint a true one. My grandfather was a mountain guide. He said there are 2 types of men who challenge the peaks, the wise who fear them properly and the dead. As they climbed higher, the world transformed. Forests thinned, then vanished entirely, replaced by wind-sculpted rock and ice. The path, little more than a game trail in places, hugged cliff faces where a misstep meant certain death. Each morning, Varro checked his compass, grateful for the old veteran's gift as the sun's position seemed to shift unpredictably among the peaks. Varro's military training had hardened his body for marching and fighting, but this was different. The air itself became an enemy, so thin his lungs burned with each breath. His head pounded constantly. Simple tasks like tying knots became frustratingly difficult as his mind sluggishly processed instructions. Altitude sickness, Brennus explained, forcing Varro to chew bitter herbs. The body rebels against heights where gods, not men, are meant to dwell. They encountered signs of those who hadn't survived. Abandoned equipment, bones picked clean by scavengers. Once, they passed a body frozen into the ice, the man's face still locked in an expression of peaceful surrender to the cold. Why did you really agree to guide me? Varro asked one evening as they huddled near a small fire in a stone shelter built by generations of mountain travelers. Brennus was silent so long that Varro thought he wouldn't answer. My wife was taken by Roman slavers 5 winters ago, he finally said. I tracked them to the coast but lost her there. Ships had sailed for Rome. He stared into the flames. Perhaps she still lives, serving in some Roman house, wondering why I never came for her. I'm sorry, Varro said inadequately. When you spoke of crossing the impossible for love, I heard her voice calling to me across the years. Brennus looked up, his eyes reflecting firelight. I guide you because you walk a path I was too afraid to follow. The next morning, they woke to a world transformed by fresh snow and ominous clouds gathering above the higher peaks. We must hurry, Brennus urged, studying the sky. A storm comes. They pushed harder than before, fighting through snow that sometimes reached their knees. By midday, wind howled between the peaks, carrying stinging ice particles that cut like tiny knives against any exposed skin. There! Brennus shouted over the gale, pointing to a dark opening in the mountainside ahead. Cave system, used by my people for generations. They were less than 50 paces from the entrance when the mountain shuddered. The sound began as a distant crack, then grew to a thunderous roar. Varro looked up to see a wall of white cascading down the slope above them. Run! Brennus screamed, shoving Varro forward. They sprinted toward the cave entrance as the avalanche gained momentum behind them. Varro dove the last few feet, tumbling into the darkness of the cave. As he rolled to his feet, he turned back to see Brennus still outside, struggling through the deep snow. Their eyes met for one moment before the white fury engulfed the Gaul, sweeping him away in a churning mass of snow and ice. The avalanche's edge spilled into the cave entrance, narrowly missing Varro before settling into eerie silence. "Brennus!" Varro shouted, his voice echoing in the sudden quiet. Only the fading moan of the wind answered him. Varro spent hours digging through the packed snow at the cave entrance, calling Brennus's name until his voice grew hoarse. The avalanche had reshuffled the mountain's face, leaving no trace of his guide or the path they'd followed. When exhaustion finally forced him to stop, Varro retreated deeper into the cave, taking inventory of what remained. His pack contained 3 days of dried meat, the map, compass, flint and steel, and the wooden wolf carving. The loss of Brennus meant the loss of essential knowledge, the unmarked paths, the signs of weather changes, the location of shelters. Night fell outside while perpetual darkness reigned within the cave. Varro struck his flint repeatedly, hands shaking from cold and fatigue, before a spark finally caught the small bundle of tinder he'd preserved in an oiled pouch. The tiny flame illuminated ancient markings on the cave walls, symbols and crude drawings left by generations of travelers. Some he recognized from Brennus's teachings, warnings of dangerous passes, markers for water sources, directions to other shelters. As the fire grew stronger, Varro studied them intently, committing each to memory. "I will continue," he whispered to the empty cave. "I swear it, Brennus." Morning brought clear skies but bitter cold. Varro fashioned a crude torch from materials in the cave and explored deeper, discovering tunnels that previous travelers had clearly used. One passage showed signs of recent use, footprints in the dust, a discarded torch stub. Following this path, he emerged on the northern side of the peak, bypassing the avalanche-prone slope entirely. The view staggered him. Endless mountains stretched in all directions, their snow-covered peaks gleaming in the sunlight. In the distance, valleys and lower slopes showed the dark green of northern forests. "So this is what birds see," he murmured, momentarily struck by beauty despite his peril. The descent proved nearly as treacherous as the climb. Without Brennus, Varro relied on the compass and his memory of the map, but the mountain terrain defied such simple navigation. Twice he was forced to backtrack when paths ended at sheer drops. By nightfall, he had made frustratingly little progress and found no shelter. With darkness approaching and temperature plummeting, Varro remembered Brennus's lessons on emergency shelter. Using his dagger, he carved blocks from a snowdrift, arranging them in a small dome as the Gallic hunter had demonstrated. Inside the cramped space, his body heat provided minimal but crucial warmth. Hunger gnawed at him as he rationed his remaining food. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by the mountain's nocturnal sounds. The crack of freezing ice, the moan of wind through stone corridors, the occasional rumble of distant avalanches. In his dreams, Livia walked beside him through summer gardens, her voice clear as she recited poetry. He would reach for her hand only to find it cold as ice, her form dissolving into swirling snow. "Keep moving," her dream voice urged. "Return to me." Dawn found him stiff and half-frozen. As he forced himself to continue downward, the altitude sickness that had plagued him near the summit began to recede, but exhaustion and hunger took its place. He chewed on strips of the last dried meat, knowing it wouldn't sustain him much longer. On the third day alone, weakness overtook him. Resting against a boulder, Varro felt a seductive warmth spreading through his limbs despite the freezing air. The dangerous comfort Brennus had warned preceded freezing to death. "Not yet," he growled, slapping his face hard enough to sting. "Not here." Movement in the rocks above caught his attention. 3 mountain wolves watched him with predatory interest, perhaps sensing his vulnerability. The largest descended first, testing his resolve with a warning growl. Varro drew his dagger, knowing how poorly it would serve against multiple attackers. His hand brushed the wooden wolf carving in his pocket. With a sudden inspiration, He retrieved it, holding it toward the approaching wolf. "I am under your protection," he said aloud, the words sounding foolish even as he spoke them. The lead wolf paused, nose twitching as it scented him. After a tense moment, it turned and moved away, the others following. Whether coincidence or something more mysterious, Varro accepted the reprieve gratefully. Late that afternoon, stumbling through a forested slope where trees had finally reappeared, Varro discovered an abandoned hunter's cabin. The crude wooden structure, half buried in snow, offered the first real shelter since the cave. Inside, he found primitive tools, a stone hearth, and most precious of all, stored firewood. As flames crackled to life in the hearth, Varro finally allowed himself to believe he might survive. Varro woke to unfamiliar voices. He lay on furs rather than the cabin's hard floor, and the ceiling above was not wooden planks but stretched hides decorated with intricate patterns. His weapons and possessions were gone. When he tried to rise, pain shot through his frost-damaged limbs. A figure approached, a woman with intricate tattoos spiraling across her face, her dark hair braided with bones and beads. "Be still," she commanded in a language similar to but distinct from the Gallic dialects Varro knew. When he didn't respond, she switched to rudimentary Latin. "You, sick, stay." He learned he had been found unconscious in the hunter's cabin, half frozen and delirious with fever. Warriors from a mountain tribe had brought him to their winter settlement, a collection of hide-covered dwellings nestled in a sheltered valley. The woman, Rhiannon, was the tribe's healer. Under her care, Varro gradually regained strength. As his condition improved, curiosity replaced initial hostility from the tribe's people. Few had seen a Roman this far north, and none had encountered one traveling alone through winter mountains. "Why cross death peaks in snow time?" asked an echo, an elder whose leathery face mapped a lifetime in the harsh alpine environment. Communication progressed haltingly at first. Varro discovered their language shared roots with Gallic tongues he'd learned during campaigns, but many words and structures differed. Through gestures, crude drawings, and growing vocabulary, he explained his journey. Rather than the mockery he expected, his story of crossing the mountains for love earned surprising respect. These people, isolated from Rome's expanding borders, lived by different values than the civilized world he knew. "Love journey," an echo nodded with approval. "Strong heart." Days stretched to weeks as winter tightened its grip on the mountains. During his recovery, Varro observed the tribe's sophisticated adaptation to their extreme environment. Their clothing, layers of fur and leather treated with natural oils, provided protection far superior to Roman military gear. They constructed snow shelters when traveling and read weather changes in cloud patterns with uncanny accuracy. "Your people call mine barbarians," Rhiannon commented one evening as she changed the dressings on Varro's healing frostbite. "Yet you came to our mountains wearing cowhide shoes and wool cloaks, like a child dressed for summer entering winter." Varro couldn't argue. "Rome has much to learn from those it conquers," he admitted. "Rome conquers land, not knowledge." She inspected his healing toes critically. "You are lucky. We'll keep all fingers, most toes." As Varro's strength returned, he joined hunting parties, learning to track mountain goats across seemingly impassable terrain. His military discipline earned respect, while his growing appreciation for their ways slowly transformed him from outsider to guest. One morning, a hunting party returned with troubling news. Raiders from a rival tribe had been spotted near hunting grounds to the east. "They take food, furs," an echo explained grimly. "Bad winter makes hungry wolves of men." The settlement prepared for defense, but their position was vulnerable. Varro observed their preparations with a soldier's eye, noting weaknesses in their approach. "May I suggest something?" he asked an echo, sketching a defensive formation in the dirt. "In Rome's legions, we use this pattern to protect camps from attack." The elder studied the diagram thoughtfully before summoning other warriors. Varro demonstrated the interlocking shield formation that had made Roman armies nearly invincible against larger forces. Using hide-covered wooden frames similar to the Roman scutum, he trained the tribesmen in basic maneuvers. When raiders attacked 3 days later, They met not scattered resistance but an organized defense that funneled them into killing zones. The battle ended quickly with minimal casualties among the defenders. That night, as the tribes celebrated their victory, Eneko approached Varro with a solemn ceremony. Before the entire community, he presented a bone amulet carved with symbols of the tribe. "You gave us Roman war wisdom," the elder announced. "We give you mountain belonging." He placed the amulet around Varro's neck. "You are mountain brother now." Later, as firelight painted shadows across the gathering, Varro found himself sharing stories of Rome with curious tribespeople. He described forums and aqueducts, Senate debates, and military campaigns. Yet as he spoke, he realized how foreign his own culture now seemed, how arbitrary its hierarchies, how arrogant its certainties. "When you return to Stone City," Rhiannon asked, "will you still be mountain brother? Or will you forget?" "I will remember," Varro promised, touching the amulet. Some journeys change more than location. As winter's grip began to loosen, Varro prepared to continue his journey. The tribe provided him with proper mountain gear, fur-lined clothing, snowshoes, and a carved walking staff marked with trail symbols. "Northern paths dangerous," Eneko warned, sketching routes on a piece of hide. "But possible for mountain brother." The elder's weathered finger traced an unexpected path. "Here ancient way, not known to Romans. Shorter but spirits guard it. Respect mountains, they let you pass." On the morning of his departure, Rhiannon approached with a small bundle of herbs. "For strength," she explained. "And this?" She handed him a leather pouch. "For memories." Inside was a mixture of dried berries and nuts. "Tastes of mountains," she said. "When you eat in Rome, remember us." Varro was thanking her when commotion erupted at the settlement's edge. A familiar figure limped through the entrance, supported by 2 hunters. "Brennus?" Varro breathed, scarcely believing his eyes. The Gaul was gaunt, his face wind-burned and scarred by frostbite, but unmistakably alive. He had survived the avalanche, though buried and swept nearly a mile downslope. Tribal hunters had found him half dead but stubbornly tracking Varro's path. "You Romans are difficult to kill," Brennus commented dryly when they were finally alone. "And apparently impossible to guide properly. You were meant to go west from the cave, not north." Their reunion delayed Varro's departure by 2 days as they revised their plans. Brennus's knowledge, combined with Eneko's hidden paths, offered a new route across the highest passes. "The worst is still ahead," Brennus cautioned as they studied the hide map. "The spine of the mountains where even the tribes rarely venture." They departed at dawn, the entire settlement gathering to witness their leaving. Eneko presented Brennus with his own bone amulet, recognition of his survival against impossible odds. "Mountain spirits kept you alive," the elder declared. "They have purpose for you both." The first days of renewed travel brought them higher than Varro had yet climbed. Here, above the tree line, the world narrowed to essentials. The path before them, the next sheltered rest, the constant battle against wind and cold. "The mountains change a man," Brennus observed one evening as they huddled in a snow shelter. "In the valleys we worry about borders, tribes, empires. Up here there is only survival or death. Everything else falls away." On the 5th day, they encountered other travelers, an unprecedented sight in these heights. A small party of merchants struggled along a parallel ridge, their mules laboring in the thin air. Wary but desperate for news, the 2 groups converged at a sheltered pass. The merchants traded in amber from northern coasts and were attempting the earliest possible crossing to reach southern markets. "Rome buzzes with unusual news," their leader told Varro when he cautiously inquired about the capital. Senator Quintus Fabius announced the death of a soldier who had insulted his family. Quite publicly celebrated it with games. "What else from Rome?" Varro asked, maintaining a neutral expression. "The senator's daughter is to marry the consul Petronius at the spring equinox. A political match, they say, though rumors suggest the daughter's heart lies elsewhere." That night, Varro stood alone at the shelter entrance, staring at the stars scattered across the mountain sky. The equinox was perhaps 40 days away. His journey was barely half complete. "We need to move faster," he told Brennus the next morning. The Gaul studied him with knowing eyes. "The merchant's news disturbs you. Time grows short. Speed kills in the mountains," Brennus warned. "But I know another way, more dangerous but faster. Few have attempted it and lived." The path Brennus proposed was not truly a path at all, but a treacherous route across the highest spine of the Alps. No settlements existed there, no shelters built by human hands. They would be entirely alone among the highest peaks. "This is madness," Varro acknowledged as they prepared extra supplies. "Yes," Brennus agreed simply. "But sometimes madness is the only rational choice." The ascent to the spine took 3 grueling days. Here, the air grew so thin that each movement required deliberate effort. The cold bit deeper, the wind howled constantly, and the terrain became a maze of ice fields and knife-edge ridges. Standing at last upon the spine of the Alps, Varro gazed northward to lands he had never seen, territories Rome spoke of in fearful, dismissive tones. Endless forests stretched to the horizon, intersected by silver ribbons of rivers. In the far distance, on the very edge of visibility, lay the misty outline of lands the merchants called Germania. "We've crossed the divide," Brennus said quietly. "From here all waters flow north, away from Rome. We've left the world you know behind you." The descent from the Alpine spine brought them into a world that existed in Roman consciousness only as rumors and military reports. Lands where different gods ruled and Rome's name carried no weight. Forests stretched endlessly, primeval and untouched, making the managed woodlands of Italy seem like carefully tended gardens in comparison. Varro's gladius had been lost during the avalanche. In its place hung an iron dagger of Germanic design, traded from the mountain tribe, a visible symbol of his transformation. "We must be cautious here," Brennus advised as they approached the first settlement beyond the mountains. "These aren't mountain people or Gauls. The Germanic tribes have their own ways, their own grudges against Rome." The village sprawled along a river bank, its wooden longhouses built with a craftsmanship that defied Roman dismissals of barbarian capabilities. Children stopped their play to stare at the strangers. Warriors fingered their weapons with unconcealed suspicion. "Let me do the talking," Brennus murmured, "and hide anything that marks you as Roman." The village elder, a woman whose silver-streaked hair was elaborately braided with amber beads, received them in the central longhouse. Brennus conversed with her in a trading pidgin while Varro observed silently, noting details that contradicted everything Rome taught about northern peoples. The settlement was clean, organized, prosperous. Women participated openly in governance. Children learned not just warfare but complex crafts. On a table near the elder lay pieces of metalwork that would fetch high prices in Roman markets. When questioned directly, Varro identified himself as a mountain traveler from southern lands. His bone amulet from the Alpine tribe proved more valuable than any Roman credentials, earning guarded acceptance if not trust. That night, as they shared the communal meal, Varro found himself seated beside a merchant who spoke broken Latin. "You not Germania," the man observed bluntly. "Not mountains. Where?" Varro hesitated, weighing his answer. "I was born near Rome." The merchant's expression darkened. "Roman? Why come north? Your people bring only trouble, soldiers, taxes, slavery." "I'm not here for Rome," Varro replied carefully. "I travel for personal reasons. All Romans say this. Then more Romans follow." Later, Brennus chastised him. "You should have lied. Romans are not welcome here. Too many raids, too many enslaved families." "I'm tired of pretending," Varro admitted. "I've spent months becoming someone new, someone I might actually respect." Brennus studied him thoughtfully. "The mountains have changed you more than I realized." They remained in the village for 3 days, restocking supplies and gathering information for the journey ahead. Varro spent hours observing the blacksmith, whose techniques differed from Roman methods but achieved superior results with less refined materials. On their final evening, the village storyteller recounted ancient tales of the tribe's victories against southern invaders. Though he understood little of the language, Varro recognized the narrative. the same battles Roman military histories recorded as pacification of barbarian territories. "It's strange," he told Brennus afterward, "hearing the other side of our glorious conquests. History belongs to those who survive to tell it," Brennus replied. "Your Rome writes on parchment. These people write in memory and song. Both contain truth and lies." The next day, as they prepared to depart, the village elder approached Varro directly. "My son was taken by Romans," she said through Brennus's translation. 10 summers ago. For your army." Varro lowered his eyes, unable to deny his former role in an empire that conscripted barbarians into auxiliary units, often against their will. "If he lives," she continued, "tell him Adelind of the Marcomanni remembers. Tell your Rome we are not forgotten." As they journeyed southward again, following a different route that would eventually curve back toward Roman territories, Varro found himself increasingly troubled by such encounters. The proud, civilized peoples he met bore little resemblance to Rome's portrayal of mindless savages. "Rome doesn't understand what it conquers," he observed to Brennus as they camped beside a clear northern lake. "We claim to bring civilization while destroying cultures as complex as our own." "Now you sound like a Gaul," Brennus remarked with dark humor. "Perhaps that's not a criticism anymore." Their path eventually brought them to a trading post where northern goods changed hands before continuing toward Mediterranean markets. Here, cultures mingled: Germanic tribes, Gauls, even Greek merchants from distant colonies. Varro was examining goods in the market when Brennus hurried to his side, expression grave. "We must leave immediately," he said in a low voice. "A Roman military scouting party has arrived. If they're here, it means Rome pushes its boundaries northward again." "How many?" "A dozen. Standard reconnaissance unit." Varro's military experience told him what this meant. The first step in Rome's methodical expansion. Survey the lands, assess resources and resistance, report back. Conquest would follow, disguised as security measures or protection of trade routes. "Not our concern," Brennus insisted, seeing Varro's troubled expression. "Our path lies elsewhere." But as they slipped away from the trading post, Varro couldn't shake the feeling that he was witnessing the beginning of another cycle of violence, one his former life had helped perpetuate. Their journey south followed ancient trading routes through lands where Roman influence ebbed and flowed like an uncertain tide. Varro kept a travel journal, simple observations recorded on vellum scraps traded from a merchant. He documented unfamiliar plants, village layouts, defensive structures, and cultural practices unseen in Roman territories. "What will you do with these notes?" Brennus asked one evening, watching Varro sketch a Germanic water mill design superior to Roman versions. "I'm not sure," Varro admitted. "Once I would have thought only of their military value, how Rome might use this knowledge. Now," he trailed off, considering how profoundly his perspective had shifted. They traversed territories where different tribes controlled river crossings and mountain passes, each with their own customs and suspicions. Varro's appearance had changed dramatically. His beard grown full, his skin weathered, his bearing less rigidly military. With Brennus as his guide, most took him for a Gallic traveler. At a river settlement where multiple tribal territories converged, they encountered the Roman military scouts again. The unit had established a temporary camp while documenting the region's resources and defenses. Tensions with local tribes simmered visibly as Roman soldiers moved through the settlement with characteristic entitlement. "We should avoid them," Brennus advised. But that evening, conflict erupted when a Roman soldier manhandled a local woman, claiming she had cheated him in trade. As weapons were drawn and voices rose, Varro found himself stepping between the opposing groups. "Wait," he called in Latin to the Romans, then turned and repeated the plea in the Germanic tongue he'd learned during their travels. The unexpected intervention, a man who spoke both languages but belonged clearly to neither side, created momentary confusion that broke the immediate tension. "This woman's goods are fairly priced by local standards," Varro explained to the Roman officer. "Your man's ignorance of local customs doesn't constitute cheating." The centurion studied Varro with narrow suspicion. "You speak good Latin for a northerner." "I've traveled widely," Varro replied carefully. Turning to the tribal elders, Varro explained in their language that violence would only bring more Romans with less patience. A negotiated solution would serve everyone better. Remarkably, both sides listened. The dispute was settled with minimal loss of dignity for either party. As the groups dispersed, the Roman centurion approached Varro privately. "You have an unusual skill set," he observed. "Rome values men who understand these people. There's a place for interpreters in our northern campaigns." "I have other obligations," Varro replied. "A pity. We'll be recruiting more auxiliary units from these tribes soon. Men who speak their gibberish will be valuable." The encounter left Varro deeply disturbed. The casual mention of recruiting, often a euphemism for forced conscription, reminded him how easily Rome's peace became another's subjugation. That night, a messenger from the settlement found their camp, bringing an elder's invitation. In a secluded grove, representatives from 3 local tribes had gathered. "You spoke to the Romans as one of them, yet acted with honor," the lead elder stated. "We would know who you truly are." Varro considered lying, then decided against it. These people deserved honesty. "I was a Roman soldier," he admitted. "Now I'm a traveler returning to Rome for personal reasons." His confession caused visible tension until he explained his journey. The impossible challenge, the Alpine crossing, his changed perspective. The bone amulet from the mountain tribe and Brennus's endorsement eventually convinced them of his sincerity. "The Romans speak of establishing a permanent camp here," one elder said. "They claim it will protect trade. We know it begins conquest." "What would you have me do?" Varro asked. "Carry truth back to Rome. Tell them we are not savages awaiting civilization. Tell them we do not desire their protection or their ways." Later, as he and Brennus continued their journey, Varro was uncharacteristically quiet. "You cannot change Rome's nature," Brennus finally said. "Perhaps not, but I've changed. And if one man can change." Their path took them through increasingly familiar territories as they approached lands under firmer Roman control. In a roadside tavern in Gallic territory, they overheard merchants discussing news from Rome. "Senator Fabius throws a grand wedding for his daughter," one said. "Every patrician family invited. They say the consul paid a dowry that would bankrupt lesser men." "When?" Varro interrupted, abandoning his pretense of disinterest. The merchant eyed him curiously. "The spring equinox. Less than 20 days from now." 20 days to cover a distance that had taken months on the outbound journey. Varro met Brennus's gaze across the table, the challenge clear in both their eyes. "We'll need horses," Brennus said simply. They rode hard through Gallic territories, trading their mountain furs for horses and more suitable clothing for the milder southern climate. Varro's appearance now bore little resemblance to the Roman soldier who had stood before the Senate months earlier. His beard was full, his skin weathered by mountain winds, his bearing transformed. He wore a mix of Roman, Gallic, and Germanic garments, practical pieces selected for function rather than cultural loyalty. At a river crossing, they encountered a Roman tax collector with military escort, extorting excessive payments from Gallic traders. Before Brennus could caution restraint, Varro approached the scene. "Your documentation authorizes standard imperial tariffs," Varro stated in the formal Latin of government officials. "You're collecting triple the legal rate." The tax collector bristled. "Who are you to question imperial business?" "Someone who can recite tax code section by section," Varro replied calmly, "including penalties for officials who enrich themselves at provincial expense." His confident manner and precise knowledge of Roman law created uncertainty. The tax collector, unable to determine if Varro was a disguised imperial inspector, reluctantly adjusted his demands to legitimate levels. As they rode away, Brennus shook his head in amazement. 6 months ago, you would have helped him collect those taxes." 6 months ago, I was a different man," Varro replied. Their journey south brought them to territories Varro had known as a soldier. Villages he had once marched through as a conqueror now became stopping points where he listened rather than commanded, learned rather than judged. Near a settlement where Gallic and Roman territories blurred together, they encountered a familiar face, Ambiorix, the traitor who had first guided Varro to the Alpine foothills. "By all gods!" the Gaul exclaimed, staring in disbelief. "The mountain didn't claim you after all." They shared a meal at a roadside tavern, where Ambiorix could scarcely reconcile the confident, worldly traveler before him with the rigid Roman soldier he had guided months earlier. "Your journey has changed you," Ambiorix observed. "You left as a Roman. You return as something else." "A man," Varro suggested simply. "Without borders." As they ate, Ambiorix shared troubling news from Roman territories. "Your Senator Fabius grows more powerful. He's aligned himself with military factions pushing for northern expansion. The wedding of his daughter to Consul Petronius will cement this alliance." "How long until we reach Rome at full speed?" Varro asked. 12 days at least," Ambiorix replied. "And that's with fresh horses and favorable conditions." With the equinox barely 2 weeks away, they pushed themselves to exhaustion each day. Yet Varro insisted on one significant detour, a visit to the mountain village where Brennus's people lived. "We don't have time," Brennus protested. "We make time for what matters," Varro replied. "You've helped me pursue my purpose. I won't let you abandon yours." In the Gallic settlement, Varro watched his companion reunite with his tribe, sharing tales of their impossible journey. That evening, Brennus approached him privately. "I've decided to remain here," he said. "My people face increasing Roman pressure. They need defenders who understand both worlds." Varro clasped his friend's arm. "I understand. But first, I'll see you to the Roman borders," Brennus added. "A promise is a promise." Before departing, Varro addressed the tribal council, sharing knowledge gained beyond the mountains, defensive techniques, Roman military patterns, negotiation strategies. Information that might help them maintain independence against the empire's relentless expansion. "Why would a Roman help us resist Rome?" asked an elder. "I've seen beyond the borders of what I was taught to believe," Varro replied. "There are truths on both sides of any frontier." 2 days later, they reached the formal boundary of Roman-controlled territory. Imperial standards marked the road, and a garrison fort stood visible on a nearby hill. For Varro, it was a threshold between worlds. "This is where we part," Brennus said. "I cannot enter Roman lands safely." They dismounted, facing each other as equals despite having begun as enemies. "If you succeed," Brennus asked, "what then? Will you return to being a Roman soldier? Forget what you've seen beyond your empire's walls." Varro considered the question carefully. "I can never be only Roman again. The Alps didn't just change my location, they changed my vision." "And the senator's daughter? Will she understand this new man you've become?" "If she doesn't," Varro said quietly, "then perhaps I haven't truly found what I was seeking." They embraced as brothers before Varro mounted his horse and rode toward the garrison checkpoint. As he approached, a sentry called for him to identify himself. For a moment, Varro hesitated, the weight of multiple identities pressing upon him. Legionary, traveler, mountain brother, Rome's son, barbarian friend. "I am Marcus Aurelius Varro," he finally answered. "Returning to Rome." Roman roads felt strangely artificial after months of mountain paths and forest trails. Varro rode past orderly fields and symmetrical orchards, the land shaped to human will in ways that now seemed both impressive and faintly presumptuous. At a roadside shrine, he encountered his first formal Roman religious ceremony since beginning his journey. Watching citizens perform familiar rituals, he found himself noticing details he'd overlooked his entire life. How the ceremony centered on bargaining with gods rather than understanding them. How participants moved with mechanical precision rather than spiritual connection. "Strange how the familiar becomes foreign when seen through new eyes," he murmured to himself. His re-entry into Roman society brought unexpected challenges. Habits formed in tribal longhouses and mountain settlements now marked him as different. He sat cross-legged rather than reclined at meals. He instinctively acknowledged elders with specific gestures. He treated women as equals in conversation. At an inn 3 days from Rome, Varro sent a message to the capital through a merchant courier. addressed simply to Titus of the 2nd Legion. It contained only a few words. The mountains are crossed. The challenge met. For days to Rome. The next morning, as Varro prepared to depart, the innkeeper approached. A soldier arrived before dawn asking for you, he said, pointing to a figure waiting by the stables. Varro, you magnificent fool. Titus embraced him fiercely. When I got your message, I rode through the night. Once alone, Titus studied his friend with amazement. I would have passed you in the street without recognition. You look more Gaul than Roman now. I feel more Gaul than Roman sometimes, Varro admitted. As they rode toward Rome, Titus provided crucial updates. The wedding proceeds in 3 days, at the Temple of Jupiter. The senator has spared no expense to demonstrate his newfound prominence. And Livia? Titus's expression darkened. There are rumors of her resistance, quickly silenced. She appears at required functions but speaks little. Her handmaiden Demetria was dismissed after being caught with forbidden correspondence. Is there a way to reach her before the ceremony? Nearly impossible. She's kept under constant watch, ostensibly to prepare for her wedding. In truth, I believe the senator fears she might take desperate action to avoid the match. Varro absorbed this news grimly. What of the senator himself? His influence grows daily. The wedding alliance with Petronius positions him near the center of power. He's used your death to gain sympathy among certain factions. The grieving father who lost a potential son-in-law to the brutal northern wilds. He announced my death publicly? With theatrical grief. There was even a small ceremony honoring your service and sacrifice. All while privately celebrating that his problem had solved itself. Their conversation paused as they passed a military checkpoint. Varro kept his face partially concealed beneath a travel hood, but his altered appearance provided better disguise than any cloak. I need to reach the Senate before the wedding, Varro said once they were alone again. The senator must be forced to honor his challenge publicly. And if he simply denies making it, it would be your word against a senator's. Then I'll need witnesses. Were any other senators present when he issued the challenge? Titus considered this. Several. Gaius Marius for certain. Perhaps Lucius Cornelius. Marius has no love for Fabius. He might speak truth if pressed. As they continued toward Rome, Varro shared selected tales from his journey, the mountain tribes, the Alpine crossing, the Germanic settlements. Titus listened with growing amazement. You've seen more of the world than most generals, he finally said. You speak of these barbarians as if they were our equals. In many ways, they're our betters, Varro replied. They build without destroying. They honor their elders without enslaving their children. They fight to protect their homes, not to expand their borders. Titus studied his friend with concern. Be careful speaking such thoughts in Rome. They sound dangerously close to treason. Is truth treason now? It always has been when it threatens power. On their final night before reaching Rome, a messenger arrived at their camp bearing a sealed letter. Titus accepted it cautiously, checking for signs of tampering before handing it to Varro. It bears no mark, but the quality of the seal suggests patrician origin. Breaking it open, Varro found a message in familiar handwriting. Asterisk, they tell me you perished in the mountains, yet I do not believe it. If by some miracle this reaches you, know that I am to be wed at midday on the equinox. Father has ensured I cannot escape this fate. Whatever has become of you, know that my heart remains unchanged. L***. Varro stared at the message for a long moment, touching the faded words as if they might connect him directly to her hand. We ride at dawn, he said finally. I have a challenge to complete. The next day, as they crested the final hill on the approach to Rome, the eternal city spread before them, its temples and forums gleaming in the morning light. Varro reined his horse to a stop, taking in the view. Does it look as you remembered? Titus asked. Smaller, Varro replied thoughtfully. Magnificent still, but smaller. Dawn broke over Rome as Varro and Titus finalized their plan. They had one day before the wedding ceremony to confront Senator Fabius and force him to honor his challenge. The Senate convenes this morning to discuss northern border policies, Titus explained. Fabius will be there, positioned prominently as the new expert on Gallic territories. Appropriate timing, Varro commented with grim humor, adjusting the small pouch of barbarian gold he'd collected during his journey. Proof of lands traversed and peoples encountered. They parted outside the city gates. Titus to arrange additional support, Varro to prepare for his appearance. Rather than immediately announcing his return, Varro moved anonymously through familiar streets, observing Rome through transformed eyes. The city's grandeur remained impressive, yet he now noticed what before had been invisible: the stark divisions between patrician and plebeian areas, the casual cruelty towards slaves, the arrogant assumption of superiority embedded in every monument. For the first time, he saw Rome as outsiders must see it: magnificent but merciless, advanced yet primitive in its values. Near the Forum, Varro encountered a Germanic slave unloading trade goods. The man's tribal markings matched those from a northern village he had visited. Speaking quietly in the man's native tongue, Varro asked about his homeland. The slave's astonished response, hearing his language from a Roman, nearly brought tears to his eyes. 5 years since anyone has spoken to me in my own words, he said. Such moments reinforced Varro's certainty that completing his challenge meant more than winning Livia's hand. It meant bringing truth back to a Rome that understood too little about the world it sought to rule. At midday, he positioned himself near the Senate entrance, watching as Rome's elite arrived for the session. Senator Fabius appeared with his usual entourage, his expression smugly confident. Consul Petronius accompanied him, an older man with cold eyes and a reputation for ruthlessness in both politics and personal affairs. There walks the man who would claim what isn't his to take, Varro murmured. When the session was fully gathered, Varro entered quietly, keeping to the shadows of the public gallery. Senator Fabius was addressing the chamber, advocating for expanded military presence in northern territories. These barbarians understand only strength, he declared to nodding agreement. I have experienced their savagery personally, having lost a potential son-in-law to their brutal wilderness. A convenient loss, it seems, Varro called out, stepping forward into the light. The chamber froze in shocked silence. Fabius stood paralyzed at the podium, his face draining of color as though seeing a ghost. Marcus Aurelius Varro, Varro announced formally, returned from the Alps as challenged. Murmurs erupted throughout the Senate. Fabius recovered quickly, his political instincts taking over. A remarkable return, he stated smoothly. Rome celebrates your survival, soldier. I come not for celebration but for truth, Varro replied, his voice carrying through the chamber. Months ago in this very room you issued a challenge. Cross the Alps and return alive, you said. Then perhaps I'll consider your suit for my daughter's hand. Fabius's expression hardened. You misunderstood a dismissal as a challenge, soldier. A common mistake from one unaccustomed to senatorial discourse. Several senators shifted uncomfortably at this obvious lie. Varro had anticipated this response and turned to address the wider chamber. I call upon Senators Gaius Marius and Lucius Cornelius to confirm the challenge as witnessed. Marius, a weathered military man with no love for patrician games, rose slowly. The challenge was issued as stated. We all heard it. Fabius's face flushed with anger. A technical statement, never intended. I have fulfilled your challenge, Varro interrupted, approaching the Senate floor. A breach of protocol that caused guards to step forward until senior senators waved them back, too intrigued to halt the unprecedented scene. Varro emptied his pouch on the marble floor. Gold coins from Germanic tribes, amber from northern coasts, and other artifacts scattered at Fabius's feet. Evidence of my journey, Varro stated. I have crossed the Alps in winter. I have returned. Your challenge is met. The Senate chamber buzzed with excitement. Such drama hadn't enlivened proceedings in years. Fabius glanced desperately toward Consul Petronius, who watched the scene with calculating eyes. The personal arrangements of my household are hardly Senate business, Fabius blustered. But a senator's honor is. came a voice from the chamber entrance. All heads turned to see Livia standing in the doorway, a shocking breach of tradition, as women never entered Senate proceedings. Behind her stood her mother Valeria, equally defiant. "Father," Livia said, her voice clear and steady, "will you honor your word before all of Rome? Or shall your fellow senators learn that Quintus Fabius Maximus places political convenience above his sacred honor?" The Senate chamber erupted in chaos. Women in the Senate was unprecedented, a violation of Rome's most sacred traditions. Yet none moved to remove Livia, transfixed by the unfolding drama. Senator Fabius recovered first, his political mind calculating options. "Daughter, this is most inappropriate. Return home immediately." "Answer my question first, father," Livia insisted. "Will you honor your word?" Consul Petronius stepped forward, his cold eyes assessing the situation. "This spectacle demeans the Senate. Senator Fabius, control your household." "My household includes my word," Livia countered, "and my father's challenge has been met." Varro watched the tension between father and daughter, a microcosm of the boundaries and restrictions he'd come to question during his journey. Before anyone could respond further, he stepped forward again. "Senators of Rome," he addressed the chamber, "my journey was meant to prove my worth to Senator Fabius. It has instead proven something more valuable to me, and perhaps to Rome." He gestured to the northern artifacts at his feet. "Beyond our borders live peoples we call barbarians, yet who build societies with wisdom we might learn from. I've walked among Germanic tribes who practice democracy more sincerely than we do. I've seen justice systems among the Gauls that protect the weak more effectively than our courts." Murmurs of outrage mixed with fascination spread through the chamber. Such talk bordered on sedition, yet came from a man who had accomplished what many deemed impossible. "The true frontier isn't the Alps," Varro continued. "It's the boundary between what we know and what we refuse to learn." Senator Marius, the old general, studied Varro with new interest. "You went seeking a marriage and returned a philosopher, soldier." "I returned a man who has seen beyond Rome's shadow," Varro corrected respectfully. Senator Fabius, sensing the mood shifting away from his control, made a calculated decision. "My challenge was indeed met," he conceded with feigned magnanimity. "I am a man of my word. However, my daughter's betrothal to Consul Petronius represents an alliance vital to Rome's interests. Personal desires must yield to public good." It was a masterful political maneuver, acknowledging the challenge while creating a patriotic excuse to reject its consequences. Several senators nodded in agreement. Varro turned to face Livia across the chamber. Their eyes met in silent communication. Everything they'd risked, everything they'd sacrificed, balanced against Rome's unyielding social order. Then Livia spoke, her voice stronger than anyone had ever heard it. "I stand between two men. One crossed the Alps in winter, facing death daily, changing himself fundamentally rather than accepting arbitrary limitations. The other accumulated power through political alliance and inheritance." She stepped further into the chamber. "If Rome truly values courage, perseverance, and growth, the virtues our ancestors claim to cherish, then the choice is clear." Consul Petronius's face darkened with anger. "This is outrageous. Senator Fabius, I withdraw my suit. I'll not be humiliated by a disobedient girl." The sudden reversal stunned the chamber. Senator Fabius's carefully constructed alliance crumbled in an instant. Before he could salvage the situation, another senator rose. "I, for one, would hear more about these northern territories from someone who has actually seen them," he declared, "particularly their defenses and resources." Others voiced agreement. Varro's journey, meant as an impossible challenge, had unexpectedly transformed him into a valuable asset. A Roman who understood the North as few others did. In the political flurry that followed, Varro approached Livia, reaching for her hand. For the first time since his return, they stood face to face. "You've changed," she observed softly, studying the weathered face that had endured so much. "In every way that matters," he agreed. "Are you disappointed?" Her answer was to press something into his palm, the other half of her ivory comb, matching the piece he'd carried across mountains and wilderness. "I kept my promise," he said, joining the pieces. "As did I," she replied. "I waited." 3 months later, a small wedding ceremony united Varro and Livia, not in the grand temple of Jupiter as originally planned for her marriage to Petronius, but in a garden sanctuary where Roman tradition mixed with elements from beyond the empire's borders. Senator Fabius, having salvaged his political position by embracing his new son-in-law's expertise, offered grudging acceptance if not genuine blessing. Varro's detailed knowledge of northern territories had proven valuable enough to overcome his common birth, particularly as tensions with Germanic tribes escalated. After the ceremony, Varro presented Livia with a simple silver ring rather than the ornate gold traditional for patrician brides. "It's beautiful," she said, admiring its subtle craftsmanship. "Made by a Germanic silversmith," Varro explained. "The same people Rome calls uncivilized." As guests celebrated around them, they spoke quietly of the future. "The Senate has requested I lead a diplomatic mission back across the Alps," Varro revealed. "Not to conquer but to understand. To build connections rather than walls." "When do we leave?" Livia asked without hesitation. Varro's surprise must have shown on his face, for she smiled. "You crossed boundaries to reach me," she said. "Perhaps it's time I crossed some as well." The mountains would be difficult again, the journey challenging. But this time, they would face the passage together, not as Romans conquering barbarians, but as bridges between worlds too long separated by ignorance and fear.